When Shopify says you can sell anywhere, they mean it. Woo, hold up. Just got a new sale. Whoa, Shopify doesn't mind if you're at sea level or on top of the world.
Whether you're selling carabiners or crop tops, start selling with Shopify today and join the platform simplifying commerce for millions of businesses worldwide. This is Possibility, powered by Shopify. Sign up for a free trial at shopify.com/offer22. Shopify.com/offer22.
Empire.
Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcast. You're watching on YouTube, like button, subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Empire Media. That's AMPIRE. Always much appreciated. In a minute, I'm going to get to my roundtable discussion with three of the other beat reporters, with Sam Fortier from the Washington Post, Matthew Paris from the Washington Times, and Pete Hailey from NBC Sports Washington. I wanted to bring them on. I had them on before the season, if you recall, and just to kind of go over the entire season, some predictions, some thoughts, etc. Well, we're kind of revisiting that during the bye week, or we taped it on Friday. So just to get an update on everything, where they think the season's at, what do they think for the next 4 games? You know, some thoughts on the quarterback play, on the defense, on the run game, all this stuff. So we talked for a good half hour about all this stuff. So I think you'll enjoy it. Now, before I get there, a couple of things. One, you can follow these guys on Twitter. It's at Pete Hailey, NBCS, and it's HAILEY, at Sam Fortier, the number 4TR, and then Matthew Paris, it's at Matthew_Paris, PARAS. Give them a follow. Anyways, stick with me for 1 minute because I got a couple updates here, and then we'll get right to the conversation. First of all, Center Tyler Larson was placed on injury reserve on Monday, and so his season's over. And this is, I think I told you that it certainly did not look good, that he went and got a second opinion. The issue is he's got a torn meniscus. He's going to have that repaired. And also, I was told some other things to clean up, whatever that is, but that's the extent of it. So it's actually okay for him, except that he's done for the season. So bad for Washington. So how do they replace him? We still don't know yet. My thought would be, if it was up to me, I'd go with Wes Schweitzer because of his strength inside, the run blocking ability. Don't know yet what they'll do because they may opt for Nick Martin. He's got more experience at center. Clearly, he started a lot more games than Wes Schweitzer, who has primarily been a guard in the NFL. So we'll see what they do, but we'll find out more on Wednesday when we're back out at the facility. On Tuesday, the players return. They have a walkthrough, not open to the media. So there you go. So we'll find out more on Wednesday. I'm hoping to find out more before that point, but we'll see. If not, we'll let you know on Wednesday. Also, the other thing, Carson Wentz activated off injured reserve. Again, not a surprise. He's been practicing, would have been on the active list a week and a half ago, or for the first Giants game, had he not come down with an illness. So when he comes back, it's been made clear that he will be the backup to Taylor Heineke, but he is back. And for those wondering about that, the draft pick, the compensation, we're past the point where he's going to be able to play 70% of the snaps unless there's they're past it. Like I kind of did the math today. The average number of snaps per game has been around 68. You multiply that times 4, and then you add it to his total from earlier in the year, and he's at the closest he gets to is about 50%. So they're going to keep that second round pick, give up a third round pick this year. So that's the other thing. Then of course the playoff race, and I think you should know this by now because you're Commanders fans. That's why you're here. But they are obviously in control of their playoff fates now because of how everything went Sunday, and it went well for them. Seattle losing, the Giants losing. So now the Commanders are in the 6th playoff spot. And really, when you kind of look at the remaining schedules, if they go 2-2 and win on Sunday, I don't see the Giants doing better than 2-2 over the next 4 weeks. The Giants have Washington, Minnesota, Indianapolis, and then the Eagles again. Now that last game, the Eagles will probably have it all clinched. So they may be resting their starters. The same could be true with Washington and Dallas. Dallas may have their playoff fate completely determined. So there's no gain for them to play their starters possibly. So that would be, you would look and you would think that Washington would win that game, and you would think the Giants would beat the Eagles in that situation. So we'll kind of give it there. But so really, to me, whoever wins that game, this game on Sunday, is certainly in the driver's seat for that playoff spot. And I still like Washington this one, but we'll look into more of that as the week goes on. I'll have my keys and predictions for Friday/Saturday. And I've been digging into watching the game, looking at the red zone offense, all sorts of stuff, but I'll update you that later in the week. So anyway, that's it. And by the way, when you look at Seattle's remaining games, it's 49ers, Chiefs, Jets, and then the LA Rams. So could they go better than 2-2? Sure. But if they go 2-2 and both Washington and the Giants go 2-2, well, then Seattle's out of luck, because that tie actually then benefits Washington and Seattle, because Washington and the Giants, because the Seahawks right now are 7-6. They go 2-2, 9-8. You know the math. I think you're smart enough to figure that out. So anyway, Washington's in a good spot, but they have to beat the Giants. So with all that said and in mind, let's get to my conversation with the beat reporters, or with three of the other beat reporters for the Commanders: Sam Fortier from the Washington Post, Matthew Paris from the Washington Times, and Pete Hailey from NBC Sports Washington. Enjoy. Fellas, thanks for coming back. It was a big hit last time we did this before the season. And Sam, I appreciate you eating breakfast while we're doing this. So thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
No problem. Breakfast in the club.
There you go. There you go. And then Matt Paris showing up. I said this was black tie optional. And he's got not only the black tie, but in honor of me, he's got a 3/4 zip shirt or sweater on. And it's, because apparently that's all I wear. But I will admit, I do like them. So thank you. And Pete, you're just a good dude. So thanks.
I just show up on time and I'm ready to talk Commanders. I don't do all this extra stuff.
There you go.
I would say real quick, that is the most opposite of our personalities, that Pete is the one without a bit.
And that is probably very true. So, but I did want to get, it's funny because usually you do those things, these buys, most teams get them around mid-season. We're getting them after 3/4 of the season's already played. So some of this stuff is a little bit difficult, but I did kind of want to reassess where you guys feel everything is at going down into the final 4 games. And has the season, I'll just start with this because we talked about this before the season, has the season played out to this point kind of the way maybe you thought it might?
If I remember correctly, I think we all picked between 7 and 10 wins, and it
Correct.
looks like we are on track to hit that number.
Correct.
How we got here is absolutely not how I expected. I didn't think we'd see so much of Taylor Heineke, but the defense being better, I think some of those things made sense. And so even though it hasn't been the smoothest ride, particularly to have Ron Rivera start slow and then, kind of pick it up in the second half of the season, that I think is a very foreseeable thing. So doesn't make sense how we got here, but that we are makes sense.
What about you, Pete? What do you think?
I was expecting this to be a really offensive-led team with Carson Wentz and Jahan and Curtis and Terry, and throwing the ball to Gibson. So the fact that they're so run-heavy is certainly surprising, and I didn't expect the defense to be nearly this good. I was over this D line, to be honest. I mean, it was good that they made the change in training camp between coaches, but I was looking at that as a skeptical last gasp decision. I thought there was more talent on this D line than true production, and they've pleasantly surprised me with how damn good they are week after week. So I didn't think this is how it would look at all, but I'm glad that it's relevant.
You also weren't a huge fan, if I remember right, of believing that Carson Wentz could get him there offensively. Were you? Or
I thought they would absolutely try to have him get him there, but I didn't think it would end up working out just because of what we've seen. I was pretty low on Carson, and I am still. I don't think they should go back to him. But yeah, for this to be a team that tries to run the ball 40 times a game and barely target at times Curtis and Jahan, and only when they're desperate, training camp Peter would not be very sure of himself if he saw this squad right now.
Matthew?
Yeah, I did think that the defense was going to be a bit better. I kind of remember being a little bit of the opposite of you guys, where I thought the offense was going to be worse and the defense was going to be better. But the way that the defense is better has surprised me a little bit. The emergence of a guy like Derek Forrest has been really important for them. Getting rid of William Jackson, I think, has kind of sparked this defensive turnaround, even though it's not fair maybe to blame it all on one player. The way that this season has turned around, I mean, Pete, for the listeners out there, Pete and Sam and I have a little group chat going on in the season, and Sam asked around, I think it was after they dropped maybe the Cowboys game, Sam was like, I can't tell if we're headed for the same season where they turn it on or not, or if they're like truly finished or trashed. And not to expose myself here, but I said that they were trash and that they were done. And so, I am surprised that they were able to rally like this. I know Rivera's teams always do it. Maybe we shouldn't be surprised, but I think that they've made legitimate strides in season now, and I kind of think they're good.
And the one thing we don't want you right now, Matt, is for you to expose yourself. So I appreciate
Oh,
that.
God, no.
So, and I know like,
Already.
yeah. So that was like, I had to hold that joke in there for a few seconds to give you a chance to talk. But what do you guys think has sparked the turnaround most? You want to go, Matt, start with that?
Yeah, I think it's the defense. We could say Taylor Heineke, the switch started there. They played better on offense, but really this defensive line, I think is even playing better than they did in 2020. You look at the improvements in Daron Payne's game. He's more of a pass rusher now. Jonathan Allen has continued to perform at, last year was a career year. This year might be a career year. He's living up to that contract. And even a guy like Montez Sweat, he's benefiting from the dominance on the interior. And, I'm really interested to see what they do with this defense going forward, because there's a legitimate argument now to pay Daron Payne. And I didn't think that necessarily at the start of the season.
Yeah. For me, I think it's Brian Robinson's insertion into the lineup and then just the commitment to the entire identity. I think the D-line is an excellent choice there, Matthew. And I think your outfit is excellent as well. But, Brian, when he first came back, it wasn't the guy we saw in the summer. He looked unsure of himself. He didn't look nearly as powerful, but that Eagles game felt like a real turning point where he had the 26 carries. It was only for 86 yards, but he just never gets tackled for loss. That allows this offense, while it's not anything close to explosive, to at least manage itself and stay on schedule. And just once he's been in there, it's allowed Scott Turner and Ron Rivera to just dive headfirst into this. We're going to ground and pound, eat up the clock, have 3rd and 3s, and just score, 20 points. It may not be pretty, but we're also going to keep the other team off the field so they can't supersede us.
Do you think they could have gone to that identity before Robinson got like this? In other words, because the first 4 or 5 games when he wasn't really available and the tight ends weren't healthy, could they have turned to that identity then? Or do you think they just felt like, hey, you got the toys, go try and use them?
Yeah, I think there was the temptation to really air it out. And when that Jacksonville game happened, they had 4 touchdowns and all those yards. It was like, oh, sweet, we're going to watch like a modern day offense. And then they still kind of were stuck in that. They wanted to chase that glory. But then after Wentz goes down and Heineke going in, it necessitates more of the running back led offense. So I think the first 4 or 5 games without Robinson, it was cool. Let's do this. Let's play like an up-tempo offense. Their pass rate was really high, and Scott Turner was doing some creative things. But now we've regressed, or I don't know if it's regression is the right word, but are back to playing a little more safe, and that fits just the overall offense a lot better.
Sam, I know you've got what kind of analytics you have to tie all this together here.
The analytics is just the number of times that Scott Turner has called runs. I think kind of going between those two guys, like Taylor Heineke's magic, I think is a part of it, unquestionably. And the ability, like I think the defensive line is part of the reason they're playing well is because John Allen, Daron Payne, and Montez Sweat are all playing a career high rate of snaps. And I think you can only do that because the offense is keeping them off the field, running the ball and kind of tying those two things, playing complementary football, tying it together. I think that they could have done this sooner because they did it last year without Brian Robinson. They had Antonio Gibson in that role, particularly in the Tampa Bay game. But I don't think that, I know that Ron has said that they wanted to be a run-first offense, a run-heavy offense, and I'm kind of skeptical of that.
Nobody seems to be buying that.
Yeah.
Huh, weird.
And they had Jonathan Stewart and D'Angelo Williams, so he's always liked the 2 backs.
Right. Yeah. But I think like when you look at that Tennessee game, when Carson Wentz hit those 2, downfield throws to De'Ami Brown, it's like, oh, okay, like that's what you wanted to see. And I think, for their offense to struggle in Chicago, I think there were so many reasons why you wanted to keep throwing the ball, but to not only go to Taylor and go all in on this approach, I think that is really why the season turned around.
Yeah. And it's funny though, too, because the other part of it is the offensive line. Are they in a better spot now? Even losing Tyler Larson to me is a big deal. And I think you'd all agree with that. but can they still operate this way? Do you think it's a sustainable way to run? And probably is better that than dropping back and trying to have them protect. What do you think?
Yeah, the offensive line, I think when you have those big interior guys, Norwell, Turner, and Larson, they're not like the athletic guys who can get out on screens or kind of do things in space. And so when you think about running downhill with Brian Robinson, that's why here's an analytic for you, Kyle. They were stopped since week 7 when Taylor Heineke came in. They've been stopped for 0 yards or had a negative gain 14% of the time, which is like the second lowest rate in the NFL. So they also hit explosive plays at one of the lowest rates in the league. So they're basically a high floor, low ceiling run game. It's just like, we're going to do this 40 times and we're going to sustain a couple drives, but then you also get the ones like in New York where you have an 8-minute drive that does cross midfield. Right. Like
40
that's
yards,
what you're accepting. And this is the whole Ron Rivera antacids, like I'm going to throw up like this, like you just leave so much to chance with this formula. But it's worked out fine, and they've benefited from quite a bit of luck, I think, as well, which shouldn't be overlooked.
And I think and in this league, the way it is now, you're going to get that. Somebody had a stat the other day, like if you reversed all the 1-score games for each team and what happened, what their record would be, like the Vikings would be like 1-10 or something like that. Mm-hmm. This team would be like 4-8, but that's part of the NFL. Matthew.
Parrott. Matthew, I like Matthew.
I do like Matthew. I have my son is Matthew. I always call him Matthew. But Mr. Paris, how much of this does Taylor Heineke, what level of credit does he deserve in all this?
I think he does a lot. It's funny. Sometimes I've tweeted after these games that he's played fine and everyone's in my mentions like, fine, he was bad. But for his standards, it's been fine. Maybe I'm just kind of brainwashed from the past few years, but like I'm so used to seeing like absolutely terrible quarterback play that when it's slightly above that, I'm like, oh yeah, this is competent. This is what it should be like, even if it's not like that elsewhere. But I think he's done, that magic that Sam referred to earlier. That is like a thing that exists. Maybe I think it can be boiled down maybe in some like EPA, that the turnovers things are no EPA, Sam.
I mean, the fact that he avoids sacks is helpful, but you can't quantify that.
But okay, even that is a huge thing. I mean, think about where this offense was earlier in the year with Carson Wentz. A lot of their offensive momentum was disrupted because Carson Wentz took a really big sack or the offensive line didn't do its job. So, they are playing better under him. And I think getting Terry McLaurin back in this offense too, making it a priority to throw to him over and over, seems like their chemistry has been really strong. And I think that's an important part of it too. And I think credit for that.
Yeah. What do you think, Pete?
Yeah, the fourth quarter stuff is really important. And you'd like it to be more present in the first, second, and third quarters. But I don't know if the Indianapolis win happens without him. I don't think the Giants tie happens without him. And I think the game he played that's been underrated was the Monday Nighter in Philly. The only interception he threw that night, I feel like, was his only interceptable ball. There have been other games where he throws 5 or 6 and maybe one gets picked off. But I thought that night he was really, really smart. He hit downfield throws to McLaurin or Samuel over the middle. Like, it wasn't bombs away, but he would have 20 to 25 yarders on key third downs. And if they could somehow get that Taylor Heineke back, then I think this offense can take another step. The Taylor they have right now, it's going to come down to the final couple minutes, and it's going to be very, very slim margins. But if you get Philadelphia Taylor, I think those margins increase a little bit more. And a key to that was the night they were converting third downs at a ridiculous rate. And that was because the running game was so good. But then you were also still getting these 3rd and 2s, 3rd and 3s. Even in the past weeks where they've been 3 of 14 or 1 of 11, they haven't been getting those short yardage third downs. So it becomes about, can Taylor and this offense convert those 3rd and shorts, which then lets them stay on the field longer, and this whole ecosystem really flourishes.
And that's a good point. And the other play in that game that was huge was the snap over the head and him getting rid of the ball because they scored on that drive. You're not scoring if he doesn't make that play. That's another benefit to him in that game. What do you think, Sam?
I mean, certainly those heads up awareness plays, even like the, kneeling at the end and getting that to seal the game, that's been big as well. I think the two things that have been different from Taylor that we didn't see last year is he's been a lot more inaccurate. I think that he was last year, throwing off target more. You saw that last week, missing Logan Thomas in the red zone. I think the red zone struggles play a part of that. I think part of that could be play calling. Ron Rivera said, he thought it was their first downs in the red zone. I think a part of it could be Taylor's inaccuracy or his arm strength. I still think those tight window throws are tough for him. But to me, those are probably the two biggest differences from the Taylor that we saw last year. He's also not scrambling as much, especially in the last few weeks. And the scrambling, as we mentioned, the sack avoidance is a big part of it, but his ability to turn what would be an incompletion, right, is normally his strength. And we hit, for whatever reason, he has not done it as much as he did in the past in the last couple of weeks. And I think that's, putting a cap on the ceiling of the offense as well.
And I'm glad you brought that up too, because to me, when people bring up his legs, they want to see more zone reads. No, the zone read's not going to change this offense, but his ability to make plays outside the pocket can lead to big plays. And I always think that that's been where he has excelled, is when he can improvise like that. And it's funny you bring up the red zone, because one of the things I've been doing this week, in addition to reading interesting 300-page depositions, is going back and looking at the red zone. And one of the things that to me has been noticeable is that there have been guys, John Bates was open. Last week, Jahan Dotson breaks open in the back of the end zone in that first series. But I also think that it feels like he's making more of a conscious effort to take care of the ball there. So if it's not 100% perfect to him, that he doesn't see it perfect right now, he's not going to throw. So, you know what I mean? And I think that's been a part of it. Just being more cautious with the ball in the red zone. So have you seen that, Sam? Have you looked at that?
I think that the decision making is a part of that. And there was a throw up the seam to Bates, I want to say 2 weeks ago, that
he was late.
He was late on it, right? And I think that's a part of it. And maybe what you're seeing is decision making. I'm seeing as partially arm strength as well. But I think maybe both of those things contribute.
I think what it is, it's not throwing it until I know he's open versus throwing him open and risking because for example, last week, the safety goes with Terry McLaurin. You see it and you say, okay, this guy should be open. And that's Dotson, because the safety's not there. But if I throw with blind trust, what if somebody's there? And then it's why'd you throw that ball? Well, because, so I definitely think there's some of that going on, and trying to be more cautious, careful with the ball in that game, that you could have used those 4 points. So, and that's the only thing. Let's look at, with him going forward, do you believe that he'll be in there the rest of the season? Do you guys believe that? Matthew?
Yeah, I think so. I part of me is it's going to be really, I don't know how really risky is the right way to put it, and I know Carson's played in 100+ NFL games, but putting a guy in who hasn't played in a couple months in the middle of a crucial playoff stretch, is that worth interrupting whatever you have with Taylor? If you weren't going to do it at the bye, I don't know if you can do it with 2 games left, and maybe that's just me thinking, and the coaches don't view it that way. But I think that could be risky to interrupt the flow of the offense. And if Carson has a game where he needs to find himself, and you might just waste that weekend with a chance to maybe get a victory because this guy's rusty. But also, I think the O-line issues will increase the importance of Taylor's mobility, and Carson just doesn't have that. And when pressure's in his face, it looked like he would recede and just fall backward. And there's been times where Taylor does that too, but there are also times when Taylor knows where the check down is better, or knows that he can step up and run around. So between the necessity of, having Carson warm up versus Taylor's just placement in the locker room, and also his understanding of the offense, I don't think it makes sense for Carson to go in unless there's an injury.
What do you think, Matt?
Right. Well, I think the argument for playing Carson Wentz back a few weeks ago was that you invested so many resources in him in the offseason. You wanted to see if he could be your quarterback for next year still. Well, that argument doesn't really apply anymore, because the season is now, so you can't really evaluate for the future if you put Wentz back in there. So it makes sense to keep with Heineke, and all the things that Pete just mentioned, that the offense seems to have a distinct identity. And I just look at the slate, and I don't really see a game where Heineke could have a meltdown anytime theoretically, but I don't really see an opponent that, where does Carson Wentz really elevate you compared to Heineke? I don't.
That's a good point. But I'm also curious from your end too. Are we going to see Chase Young?
I have sworn off Chase Young predictions. I am not doing.
I don't know how anybody could.
We will see him. I don't know if we'll see him play, but
we'll
he'll be
see
around
him when we see him.
Exactly.
No, we're all there. We'll see him when we see him, right?
Yeah.
Giant question mark.
Okay, there you go.
I think that the optimism could be partly real. Like, oh, we have conversations with Chase every week. He feels good. We're going to see him go. Then the illness happens or whatever else happens. But I think a part of this could be strategic. I think that they totally could know that he's not playing that week, and Ron could still be like, yeah, he's absolutely playing, to force Brian Dable, as he said in his press conference the other day, to spend 20 minutes or 40 minutes on preparing for Chase. But as far as, are we going to say Chase Young can play this year? I have no idea.
There. And I think we're all there. So I don't think it's worth going around to do this. What about, like, let's look over the final 4 games. What do you think happens? I mean, is this team going to be in the playoffs, Pete?
I think they will be. And I think the tie dampened the enthusiasm a little bit, but I think they'll come back and get the Giants next Sunday at FedEx Field, the most beautiful stadium in the National Football League. And I missed it already. And then, I don't know if the Niners game is as easy as one would think, just because of their quarterback change. Like, that team is so good top to bottom and could still do huge damage in the playoffs. But between, I think the 3 games after that, it's a couple of toss-ups. And if you win 2 of those 4, you feel pretty good. And if this team gets hot and maybe catches Dallas at the end of the year, if they have nothing to play for, which feels a little unlikely, but maybe you get 3 out of 4 and you really burst your way in. But I like their chances quite a bit. It's dumb, but I think this team is built for December and January football with the D line and the running game. And I think, and also Ron and this coaching staff last year at that bye week made some really key adjustments and boosted them to that 4-game winning streak right after the bye. And we've heard the little thing about Scott Turner with extra time to prepare, what he can come up with. This bye week gives them a chance to self-scout and figure out a couple of maybe advantages they could find. So I think they'll come back healthier. They'll come back recharged. They'll have some new wrinkles, and they play some opponents they can take advantage of.
And I will say before we go on, like, we are taping this on Friday, so this is going to run early in the following week. So whatever happens Sunday, we don't know at this point. Go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to say congrats, Pete, by breaking out into an ESPN type of personality. You just became the Colts' next head coach. So
you're going to be my play caller, Paris. Actually, no, I want Sam. Sam is really smart. I want Sam.
All you just need is the National Football League lingo need to drop one of those in.
What's your prediction, Matt? You're going to start talking. Keep finishing, man.
Yeah, please.
I'm only here for bits. No. So I do think they're going to make the playoffs, and I actually think the tie kind of helps them. Everyone kind of viewed it as a disappointing result. It could be in the long run, but you look at last year, the Steelers, they were 9-7-1. The other teams behind them were 9-8. That tie made a huge difference. I think it could. I really think it's between either these guys, the 49ers, or the Seahawks, depending on how the NFC West shakes out. I just pulled up the Seahawks schedule. They have they have the Panthers, they have the Niners, they have the Chiefs, the Jets, who are playing well, and then they close on the Rams. So, it's not the toughest stretch. It's not the easiest stretch, but,
they have a couple wins where you say, like, it's different. Like, yeah, Kansas City and the Chiefs and the Niners are going to be tough, but go on.
I think the Jets, too. I mean,
yeah.
That'll be fine. Yeah, that'll be a position. So, I kind of like these guys to make it as a 7th seed, but I haven't booked my trip to Minnesota, let's put it that way. Or
how about Glendale?
Yeah. Oh, that goes without saying. I did fill out a Super Bowl credential the other day. That was an actual thing that happened for some reason.
What do you think, Sam?
I think that they will make the playoffs as a 6 or 7 seed, and I understand that is an important part of Ron Rivera taking a step forward. Actualizing the promise that he said before the year, that the growth that he wants to see in terms of his tenure here. But I think, just to kind of be a little different from what those guys said, because I think they covered it really well, one of the most interesting things to me is, can they secure their playoff spot by the last week of the season? Because I think if you do that, you give yourself an opportunity to perhaps play Sam Howell. Because I do think that if you go into this offseason without having seen him play, you're in a difficult position, because I think that Taylor and Carson are not the answer here long-term. And the only guy that you could potentially see in that role is Sam Howell. So, but can you play him if these games matter for postseason seeding? I don't think so. I don't think you can sell that to the team. But hey, if the last week of the regular season, you have your 6 or 7 seed locked up, can you then say, hey, we want to see what this guy is, so we're going to put him out there? I think that could be a really big deal. And maybe he's not the guy for sure, but I think that you're just in the same position if you don't see him.
I think
I hear you on that.
Yeah.
I just, sorry, kind of interrupt you on your own podcast, but I just think one game one way or the other. Like if he plays well, you can't be like, all right, cool, our whole offseason's changed. And if he plays poorly, you can't be like, this guy's a
Right.
scrub. I like the idea, but I don't know if 4 quarters is a big enough sample size, and I know sample size matters too.
I would tend to agree with. I think it'd be good to get him experience to watch himself on film and just to go from there. I think for him, it's going to be, what do they think of his development from the time OTA started to the end of camp to that point,
Sure.
and is he accelerated enough? And I do think that they like him. They drafted him, and they would have drafted him earlier had they needed a quarterback. But so I think they do like him. I do think he's an intriguing guy moving forward, and it'd be good to get him some experience. But I don't know if you could draw great conclusions from that. But I do think you could at least give him some experience and say, okay, there will be some things you can draw upon, but you don't want to go overboard one way or another in case, like Pete said, he goes in there and he doesn't play well. Then it's like, well, you don't want to say, because he does have skills.
Sure. If we're talking sample size, 4 quarters is greater than 0 quarters is all I'm saying.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'm not going to disagree. Like, I think it'd be a good thing to get him some time. If he doesn't play well, you don't want to go overboard the other way. So have you guys, and we'll just close with this, like, have you guys seen the growth? Ron talked about that year 3. Have you seen that year 3 growth, and has there been a bigger area for the team development that has lead you to believe, maybe look at the future a little bit differently?
The thing that stands out to me, and I'm sorry to jump ahead, but
no, go ahead, Sam.
The getting rid of the "here we go again" mentality, which I think was ingrained before he got here and was a thing the first 2 years. I think that's a big part of it, and I think that committing to the run and having an identity and building that confidence, I think those are things that you can't really quantify, but do seem to have a tangible effect on the locker room. I think we've all seen that going in there every day. When they have something that they excel at, and you can say, hey, we're going to go into this game and this is how we're going to win, even against a heavily favored opponent like Philly. I think that's a step forward, and you're not a Super Bowl contender, but you are at least competitive with most teams in the league, and I think that's a step forward.
I think the 3 years in a row this team hasn't stopped playing hard, hasn't stopped competing. That matters. And that's unquantifiable, but I think Ron's biggest strength is keeping the locker room united and focused and always in it. And that's progress. But I'm torn on this because it's year 3, and just like it was in year 1, they're fighting their asses off to make the playoffs. They have a really narrow formula for doing so. And that's what this team was to begin with. Like, we haven't necessarily found the quarterback, which matters the most. And while there's been nice developments with Derek Forrest and Benjamin St-Juste and Jamin Davis and all these guys, like, the player development's been pretty encouraging. It doesn't feel like this team is much closer to competing for a Super Bowl. Sure, going from 1-4 to this feels amazing and I'm relishing it, but the big picture wise, I don't know how much giant progress has been made in 3 years, and that's a long time in the NFL.
Matt, before you answer, Sam, does your hat say happiness is being married?
It does.
Okay, I'm just checking.
Sam's had a big bye week and he hasn't told us.
Yeah, what have you not told us?
I figured we were doing this on video. I always try to come with an extra element.
Okay, thank you for doing that. All right, Matt, you want to close
really
on
noticeable.
Yeah, we waited until the 30-minute mark of this podcast. So
I just noticed what it said. I couldn't tell.
I think the thing that I think is sustainable past this season is the defense, depending on what happens with, Daron Payne isn't going to necessarily make or break that defense, but I think they have a foundation on this defensive line that if you look at Ron's teams in Carolina, that was if you look at the growth in those years, and I know it's not a perfect 1-to-1 parallel, but those defenses were pretty good throughout his 10 years until the end. I think that's sustainable. The offense is the big question for me, though. I don't necessarily know if they can keep doing this, even though they have that run first identity. They've, gone into that this year as the season's progressed. They're going to have to address quarterback sooner or later. If we do follow Ron's pattern, though, they'll go 7-9-1 next year, and I've already written my gamers.
Hey, all right. Last, tell people where they can follow you guys.
Pete Hailey, NBCS, and that's all I care about. Please find me on Twitter, excited
and the podcast.
And Washington Football Talk podcast.
There you go, Sam.
Sam SAM 4 TR on Twitter. You could have also followed Pete Hailey's props on TikTok once upon a time, but RIP.
I forgot
about that.
Yeah, me too.
I usually see the TikTok stuff 3 months later on Instagram. So,
Yeah.
Matt.
Well, I made a TikTok for you, John, if you want the login. I know.
I'm not sure I want to see your TikToks, but tell people.
Oh, no, it's yours. It's at John Kime. I have you voiceover. No, you can follow me on Twitter at Matthew_Paris, Paras. And you can read my work on the Washington Times.
And if you ever need to know how many seats are in FedEx Field, Paris has the exact number. He always knows.
Yes, he does. And you can always see the Washington Times headlines during the game at FedEx. So there you go.
Yep.
Hey, guys, thanks a lot for doing this. Always enjoy it. You guys are great. Do a good job. So thank you very much.
We'll do it before the Super Bowl.
That's it for this episode. Thanks to Matt, Sam, and Pete for joining me. Always enjoy talking to these guys. They bring in a good perspective, so I always appreciate them joining me. And thank you, as always, for listening. I'll be back on Thursday with a special guest. Don't want to say yet. I want to tape it first. But I'll be back on Thursday with another podcast. So I will talk to you next time.